choose Labour and know that we have changed fundamentally. Cast your mind back to the last election. Working people up and down the country looked at my party, looked at how we'd lost our way, and they said, no, not this time. You don't listen to us anymore.
Hello and welcome. If, as seems likely, the Labour Party comes to power with a big majority, Keir Starmer will enter number 10 with a party purged of many of his enemies on the left and with a whopping majority, which polls currently predict could be larger than that achieved by Blair, Thatcher or Attlee. What is more, with the Conservative Party in disarray following what could be an historically bad defeat, Starmer will be handed an unprecedented amount of power, even in the context of a political system that tends to hand massive majorities to the winning party in these change elections, just as it did for Attlee in 45, Thatcher in 83 and Blair in 97, producing what Lord Hailsham described as elective dictatorship. Given what might be about to happen, how much do we know about Starmer? And should what we do know about him worry us? In this video, I argue that it should.
But isn't it also disrespectful when you promise people, for example, to raise income tax for the top 5% of earners, and then you ditch that when you get nearer to power? Now, there might be good reasons for that, but doesn't acknowledging that you have broken some of the promises you made go some way to fixing these trust issues that you have?
Well, I think it's
You've just totally avoided that.
Let me take that head on, because there are a number of pledges I made when I was running for Labour leadership. Most of those are still in place. They're the building blocks of what we've now put in place. Some of them have changed. And this is an issue that's important, because the reason they've changed is because we can't afford to do them anymore. I
was a Labour Party member and I voted for Keir Starmer to be leader in 2020. He told those who voted for him that he stood for, amongst other things, increasing income tax in the top 5%, increasing corporation tax, abolishing tuition fees, a Green New Deal, peace and justice in international affairs, nationalisation of rail, mail, energy and water, ending outsourcing in the NHS, voting rights for EU nationals, and promoting pluralism in the Labour Party. It's clear from this list that Starmer lied to Labour Party members to get elected, and they never really intended to keep these promises, which reveals a man who on some level doesn't respect the basic principles of democracy that underlie our political system. Now, cynics might say that all politicians lie, and I would accept that, but the fact that we do routinely accept this from our politicians, and the fact that media commentators often excuse this behaviour, reveals something profoundly disturbing about our political system.
For Sir Keir Starmer and his team, this was meant to be the day when Labour showcased its plan for clearing the NHS waiting list backlog. But the party's first big campaign launch has been overshadowed by a growing row over the veteran MP Diane Abbott. Earlier today, Sir Keir had to deny reports that Miss Abbott had been barred from defending her Hackney seat as a Labour candidate. But Miss Abbott, who was the first black woman elected to Parliament, said she was dismayed at suggestions she would not be allowed to stand. And speaking to a crowd of supporters in her constituency tonight, she vowed to remain their MP for as long as it is possible and by any means possible.
Although Diane Abbott wasn't amongst them in the end, this week the Labour Party prevented several left-wing MPs from standing, and other MPs stood down at the last minute to clear the way for the NEC to parachute figures from the Labour right, 5 of whom were themselves NEC members, into safe Labour seats, the most notorious being Luke Akehurst in Durham North. This demonstrates a factionalism and ruthlessness at the heart of the Labour machine, and has been a hallmark of Starmer's leadership, which has striven since day one to demonstrate that the party has moved on from the Corbyn years. Some might argue that ruthlessness is a virtue in politics, but it can also be a fatal flaw, particularly in the situation Starmer might find himself in after the election, heading a government with almost untrammelled power with a mandate provided by a landslide. Again, this failure to respect fundamental norms of decency and this desire to pursue power, whatever the costs, are not good qualities for political leadership.
I have one final question for you. You have in the past, and I apologise for saying so, been called boring. Given what's happened in the markets, given what's happening in politics at the moment, is it actually time for Mr. Boring?
If anybody thinks that a government that loses control of the economy is somehow exciting, I think they need to go and speak to the people who will be looking at their mortgages today, looking at prices today, now looking at their pensions today, and say that they think that sort of excitement is what they want.
My final criticism of Keir Starmer is not that he's boring, it's that he's instinctively attracted to a rather narrow technocratic managerialism, which reveals a man with no clear ideological hinterland. He's what Tony Benn famously described as a weather vane politician. He's not motivated by any big ideas or grand ideals. He simply wants to run the country competently, almost like he was the CEO of UK PLC. Again, some might argue that the country is crying out for this, especially after the leadership that we've had from the past few prime ministers. But I would argue that a politician so unmoored in the ideological traditions of the party he wants to lead is going to quickly find himself reaching to others for advice, which is something I would argue is already happening. Starmer is someone who is far too reliant upon and influenced by the team he's got behind him, which seems to be dominated by figures from the Labour right, who are sure to have a massive influence over what Starmer does in power. Furthermore, technocratic managerialism is not what the country needs at the moment. We need big ideas and bold policies to deal with the huge challenges we face as a country. In short, we need someone who will use the mandate Starmer is likely to win to reverse large parts of the political consensus established by Thatcher, unchallenged by Blair, and fatally weakened by the crisis we've all lived through since the financial crisis of 2008. That's enough for now. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you want to contribute to the debate, please comment on the video, and if you liked it, please do share it with others, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.